The ultimate guide to wholesaling pre-foreclosures. What is up, guys? Zach Ginn here.
Rick Ginn here.
And in today's video, we're going to show you exactly what are pre-foreclosures and the guide on how to wholesale them so you can do a ton of pre-foreclosure deals this year in wholesaling real estate. Most gurus charge you thousands of dollars for this information, but we're going to give it to you absolutely for free. So let's break it all down.
So what is a pre-foreclosure? You got to understand what the word foreclosure means. I'm going to give it to you in layman's terms. It's basically when a homeowner stops paying their mortgage. A mortgage is a lien that is recorded against the property with a promissory note. And when that mortgage does not get paid back, the owner of the mortgage has a legal right to file a foreclosure. Now, once they file a foreclosure, they give legal notice saying, listen, if you do not come clean and get caught up on your payments, we have the right to prove in court that you didn't make the payment. And if that's the case, they have the right to put the house up for auction to recoup their losses from the mortgage. Basically, a pre-foreclosure is once they start filing, and the initial filing is called a lis pendens, just a fancy word for a lawsuit. It is public. And basically what the bank does is prove they owe the money. They have to go through the court process. Depending on what state it is, it takes time. And during that process, it can be anywhere from as early as 120 days to a couple years. That is what we call the pre-foreclosure, meaning if they don't take action to correct it, they are most likely going to lose the house. And worst case scenario, they actually get evicted and kicked out of there by the sheriff. So this is the part of pre-foreclosure where you can actually try to buy the house and actually let them leave on their own terms, hopefully get them some money to walk away from it with their equity. But the sooner they act, the better. Catching people that have some sort of foreclosure going on their property in the pre-stages, meaning before it goes to auction, it means they have option. The sooner they act, the more options and the less stress of the situation. Pre-foreclosures, unfortunately, is one of the most motivating factors for people to sell a house. But to be honest with you, some people bury their head in the sand. We're going to talk about where the sweet spot is in pre-foreclosure in this.
What you need to understand about the pre-foreclosure process here is it's a pretty simple 5-step process. Stage 1 of the pre-foreclosure is what we call missed payments. This is when the seller stops paying their mortgage. Nothing happens. Usually 2 to 3 payments out here, they're not paying their mortgage. Nothing scary happens. The house isn't taken over quick. But we should understand this is the first part of the pre-foreclosure process.
So stage 2 is just the next stage after a missed payment, meaning the bank's going to notify it. So you got to understand the banks are hired to service these mortgages, and their job is to collect timely payments and then give them to the owner of the mortgage. And when they get behind in arrears, it basically becomes a debt collection agency. Now, they start out with these nice little letters, and then what they'll do is the letters will start to turn pink, and then eventually what they'll do is start picking up the phone and start harassing the homeowner and try to scare them into getting it paid, or we're going to have to file a lawsuit and do a foreclosure on your house. Now, in my opinion, this is the point where I actually love to work with the homeowner, because if they're fearful and they want to take action, either they're going to pay the mortgage, which they don't have the money to do it, or they're going to make a decision to solve the problem and work with a wholesaler like you or me to solve the problem on their own terms. Now, if you can catch them early, because that's when they want to fix it. But what happens as time goes on, they tend to go, well, nothing's happening, I'm not going to worry about it. If you can catch them in stage 2, in my opinion, this is the sweet spot, because usually they want to take action. And when they do that, they have the most options available to them.
Stage 3 is basically public records, what we call the lis pendens. This is basically when no one's really answering the notification. They've still received no payments to the bank. They're just going to publicly put on file a motion to take the property back. They basically publicly put it on public records. They'll do something called lis pendens, basically just moving forward with everything. Sometimes they record something called a notice of default, a notice of judgment. Sometimes it's called a notice of lis pendens. Basically trying to start the process, creating a court action, a court date, a lawsuit that they are trying to give to the seller to take back the property. Now, this is when we can actually see when the people are in pre-foreclosure. Unfortunately, when people are behind on their payments, we really can't get that information publicly. Once the bank actually starts a lawsuit saying, hey, we're moving forward with this and we're taking our legal action, that's when us, the wholesaler here in stage 3, can actually start pulling this information. Now, before we get into stage 4 is really not the best one. This is when it gets very difficult for us to actually wholesale the deal. Between stage 3 and stage 4, this is what I call the wholesaling window of opportunity. Now, I know that's a very fancy term. This basically, once stage 3 happens, and basically the month or 2 or 3 months after that till stage 4 happens, that's when we can write up a contract, wholesale the house, get it locked up, bring it through a buyer, and actually help and save the seller here. Once it gets into stage 4, it becomes a lot more difficult to wholesale. So right when this happens, this is when we need to start start marketing the sellers and getting these wholesaling deals.
So now we get to stage 4, and that's basically when they set an auction date. And at this point, to be brutally honest with you, the destruction has happened. So what happens at that point is they've found in favor of the plaintiff, which is usually the bank, and they've entered into basically a default judgment against the owner. And now they're entered into the records. Now we're going to put it up for sale so they can recoup it. Now, usually they get about 30, sometimes 60-day notice on the sale date, and they put a notice on the door. They get all sorts of legal correspondence. And at this point, I'm going to be honest with you, especially as a beginner wholesaler, there's not much you can do, because to change the course of this lawsuit, you have to bring in a lawyer. Lawyers cost money, and the last thing you want to do is put $1,000 or $1,500 out of your pocket. You might have a contract, but honestly, to get it off that auction block is going to take a court order with a judge. Now, keep in mind, up to this point, most of the homeowners haven't even responded or even show up to court. So the odds of getting that motion accepted are best 50-50. And this is the point when the homeowner is going to go, hey, Rick, I'm ready to sell you the house. The truth is they've gone through such denial. Now they know they're physically losing the house and they have no say in it. Now they magically want to do whatever they have to do to sell the house, even if they get no money. The truth is it's usually too late. Then the procrastination is taken over. And 9 times out of 10, you'll waste your time at this point. Try to catch them from stage 3 all the way up to 1. That is the sweet spot in pre-foreclosures. Once that auction date's set, usually the damage is done and there's very little you can do. And honestly, unless you're going to take a huge financial risk, you're better off going to find another seller.
And then stage 5, once the auction date's set, there's either an auction. Usually the property gets sold during the auction. And if there's not enough money that the property gets sold for the bank to recoup it, the bank actually just takes the property over themselves with what's called an REO. I don't really have to get into that right now because it's a little more complicated, but basically the bank takes over the property. The seller doesn't own it anymore and we can't really wholesale this. And we want to avoid this because it ruins the seller's credit. It's embarrassing. It's publicly on their records. It's a lot more difficult for them to get another mortgage or to even rent on another property. Destroys their credit. We want to help the sellers out. But one really important thing before we break down how to get this list is we have to be knowledgeable about the situation. So you should go to freewholesaling.com or free wholesaling course, because we do break down exactly the entire pre-foreclosure process so you know it, so you can explain to the seller more about it so they know you're knowledgeable, so they'll go with you over the other competition. So there's basically 2 ways to get the pre-foreclosure list. There's an easy way and then there's a free way, a little more difficult way. So what is the hard way, the free way to get the pre-foreclosure list? Honestly, what you need to do is go to your public records. What did we see on stage 3? The banks are filing lawsuits against homeowners to take the property back. So we're gonna go to public records and we're just gonna look for all the list pendants. We're gonna look for all the notice of default. We're gonna look for all the notice of judgment. We're gonna look at all the notice of list pendants, all those type of things. Basically lawsuits banks are doing on people, usually for more than $100,000. Usually there's a partial ID attached to these court cases. You can pull this information, usually Excel, you can organize it, just collect that data and get a list, and then we can start marketing from there. Now there is a paid way, it's a lot more easier, and honestly you're getting the same data. It's not as perfect as just getting it from public records, but for the hassle, it's not a huge difference. Just go to a website like listrei.com, listrei.com, aka PropStream, and you can just pull pre-foreclosures right there. Now remember, what listrei.com does is they get all the pre-foreclosure records and then they put it in a nice organized spreadsheet for us. Now they're not perfect. There are some counties where the data is just a little off, so I would check both of them. But for 90% of the people watching this, PropStream, aka listrei.com, is the best one to be doing.
Now, full disclosure, because this list is so easy to pull, unlike listrei.com, you're going to have a lot of people calling on the list. Don't let it discourage you, because if you become very consistent in pulling these lists and setting the discipline to make the calls and building amazing rapport with these people, eventually you'll find someone that truly wants your help and wants to do a deal with you. But please don't pull this list and go, I didn't get any traction this week or this month, and I'm not going to do it. Guys, you've got to be disciplined and you got to be consistent. And for those of you that try to get precise, exact information, you want to be first to the punch. Don't forget about going to your courthouse. Once again, it's free. You got to understand this list is public. It is a public lawsuit, so you shouldn't have much resistance at all. And most counties will give you that online. Or if you want the convenient way, you go over to listrei.com. Just stay in there and be consistent on calling these lists.
So there are 3 ways to really market to pre-foreclosures effectively. Let me just start off and tell you the one that you shouldn't be doing. Do not cold call pre-foreclosures. I cannot stress this enough. I've said this a million times and I'm going to keep saying it. Pre-foreclosures do not work with cold calling because these sellers are going to get hammered with loan servicing companies, the banks calling them. They just don't answer their phones. Now you can cold call pre-foreclosures and probably get leads doing it, but it's going to be way worse than if you just just do the other type of marketing channels. Cold call the code violations, you're gonna have twice better results than just doing the pre-foreclosure. So it's not like it's an impossible list to cold call. You can, but for most people, you're gonna really struggle doing it. So I would say do not do it at all. Now, these three that actually work are number one, SMS text blasting. Most people do not answer their phone calls when they're a pre-foreclosure seller, but heck, they love answering their texts. So go out here and text blast these sellers. If you want to learn how to text blast using the best software out there, just go to smszach.com. That's what we use and the one we highly recommend. You can also just text blast people from your phone absolutely for free. Go to a website like cyberbackgroundchecks.com, get someone's phone number, text them on your personal cell phone, or use a service like Google Voice. There's not that many pre-foreclosures every single month coming out. So you can send like 10, 20 texts a day. And over a month, that's over 600 free texts you can send out. So it's a great way to get in front of sellers. And if you want to learn exactly how to do it, just go to freewholesaling.com, our free wholesaling course.
The second method to reach out to any of these people is basically reverse driving for dollars. This is the technique where you have your pre-foreclosure list. You should have an address at this point, and then basically you're going to get sticky notes. They can be any color. They can be the brighter the better. They can be like fluorescent green type of deal or yellow, and you can either use a stamp or you can just handwrite it. Don't stress yourself out and say, "Hey, I had a quick question about the house. This is Rick," and then put on your phone number. So hopefully you have a virtual phone number, and then you go stick them. So if you had 50 leads on pre-foreclosures, you stick them on the door. The reason why this works is because number one, the advent of Ring doorbells, nobody answers the door anymore. Number two, it takes the fear out of going door to door. If they want to talk to you, you can actually engage them. Or if they want to yell at you, you can just run away and just say, my boss told me to do it. Either way, you get a high contact rate. So if I reach out to 50 people and only 10 people call me back, I just saved 40 wasted conversations. And from those 10, I can find 2 or 3 to get an appointment and usually get a contract from them. Reverse driving for dollars, it takes a little bit of time, but it's a very, very efficient. The third way would be good old fashioned direct mail. And there's always a big debate. Do I send them a postcard or a letter? I'm going to be honest with you. The leads are not a lot. It's 50, maybe 75 per county, depending on what size county you're in. The postcards aren't very effective because they get hammered on them. Honestly, sometimes just a handwritten letter that you like deliver on the door, a little bit more of an advanced reverse driving for dollars. But if you're going to do something, try to make a very customized letter, spell it out, hand address the envelope, put a first class stamp on it, stick it in the mail, and make sure you answer their phone if they call. Like the worst thing you can do is let it go to voicemail or not answer the phone because they're going to move on to the next person. If you're going to take all that effort and do it, it's not enough to send to a mail house. So you're going to have to personalize when you do that delivery. Postcards aren't really going to work. So what I would do is like a handwritten letter. You can easily put 50 letters together because the idea is to get them to contact you. The name of the game with direct mail is always, how do I get the seller to engage me? So don't put too much on there and offer a helping hand. If you need more ideas, go over to freewholesaling.com. But whichever method you choose, just be very consistent in it. It takes discipline and you have to be consistent to engage these sellers in pre-foreclosure.
Guys, that's it. Get the list, market to it. This is a great way to do it. Just understand the pre-foreclosure process. That's why you should go to freewholesaling.com or free wholesaling course. You'll learn exactly how to do it. The point here is to pull this list and stay consistent. The more consistent you are, the better chance you are getting your first wholesaling deal through pre-foreclosures or your 100th. Just go out here, pull the list, do the work, and you'll do well. Remember, we do have the free wholesaling course, so go through that if you want to learn exactly how to do it step by step, how to talk to these sellers, qualify them, and everything from there. And we'll see you guys on the next video. This is Zach Ginn signing out.
Rick Ginn signing out.
Have a blessed one.
See you guys.